I recently gave some thought to the question, what if I had to start all over from the very beginning with nothing and I had only £800 per month to live on as a nomad capitalist? Where would I live and why? Today I'm going to share with you some of the best places that I would live if I had to do it on £800 a month. Hi, I'm Lewis Butterfield, and here at Wi-Fi Capitalist, my team of 20 people, our network of global experts, and myself help 7 and 8-figure entrepreneurs and investors legally go where they are treated best. But today we're going to talk about something a little bit different. We're going to talk to people who are either just starting out, or perhaps you want to cut your costs all the way to the bone. Where would I live if I had £800 a month to live on? And I like to give thoughts this every once in a while because we've talked about the idea, for example, the lifetime emergency fund, how to put your money in offshore bank interest rates, and kick off £800 a month that you could go and you could live on, because there are places in the world that aren't too bad where you could go and actually do that. And as someone who's been an entrepreneur my entire life, I like to make sure that I'm not going to go back to there, and that's dictated my relatively risk-free or lower risk philosophy in life. So I don't want to bury the lead. I'm going to give you my number one choice to start, and then I'm going to give you some other options that you might want to think about. My number one place to live if I had only £800 a month, I would choose Tbilisi, Georgia. We've been talking about Georgia for many years here, and I think a lot of nomads have started to go to Georgia and have found Georgia as a result of our channel, and it's a very affordable place to live. But why I would choose it for number one is a couple of things. Number one, what I think is great about Georgia is the people are very easy to make friends with them, so I have built a lot of lasting friendships. People that I've worked with, they've introduced me to people, become friends with them. Just a very hospitable place. When you need something, people are there to help you often, very quickly. And so there's the spirit of friendship that I think people are looking for. If you had to spend your time in that one place, is very, very good in Georgia. I happen to own a home there, and so for me £800 a month could entirely go to food and entertainment, and just the cost of maintaining a house. But I shared not so long ago, the cost of maintaining my homes and the utility bills in Georgia are extremely cheap. Even when you're living there, cost of groceries has gone up in the last year or two, still pretty cheap, and there's plenty of local produce. You could go out and you could buy some land, you could save up and buy some land somewhere in the country for £800 a month. You could grow some of your own vegetables, though you could potentially do that if you had no backyard. You could grow some stuff, great soil. You've got a lot of local quality meats, things that are made locally, organically. And I think if you owned a home, as I do, for £800 a month, you could go out and you could have some nice dinners a couple nights a week with drinks. They have some of the best wines. It's just, I think about sitting in front of my home and from the fireplace with a glass of George and wine, and just spectacular. And so if you had to rent something, you could still rent relatively affordably and stay within that £800 a month number. Probably fewer dinners out, but that would be a great place to go. And I think also having 4 seasons is attractive to a lot of people. It doesn't get super cold in the winter, but it gets chilly. It does get relatively warm in a couple summer months, but you've got all the different seasons, and potentially that £800, I mean, you could take some day trips or some weekend trips around some really beautiful places around Georgia. So that would be my number one choice. All right, now on, before we get started, let's set a couple of criteria. Certainly there are a lot of places in the world where you could go and live in some far-flung village and raise your own goats. You can live for £800 a month. We're not talking about that, we're talking about some kind of larger town up to a mega city or somewhere in between. Also important is, can you immigrate there? Because unless you are from this country, you need people to stay there. And so if you're constantly relying on 30-day tourist visas, you can only get 2 of those a year. That's not going to work. And so I'm looking at countries where you can easily get immigration through a residence permit or extended tourist visas. In Georgia, many people can go for 360 days just on a tourist visa, or you can get a residence permit. And so my second place to consider if you're looking for a big city would be Istanbul, and that's thanks to the decline of the Turkish lira against the British sterling pound, the euro pretty much everything else, and so because of that rents aren't super cheap. But you can get a relatively affordable place in a nice area of Istanbul. Food is cheap, tea is cheap, there's a lot going on, you've got water, you've got that big city vibe, but you've also got neighborhoods which feel nice, and you can ingratiate yourself into that culture, and I think you could live a pretty affordable lifestyle given the decline of the lyrics. If you just want a huge city, that's what I would choose. Now let's say you want to live in Asia. I know a lot of people look at cities like Chiang Mai and Thailand, Chiang Rai and Thailand. Those are affordable, you could probably do it on £800 a month. For me, I'm less interested in Thailand. Nothing wrong with Thailand. Where I would go for a more laid-back Asian vibe is to Malaysia. Not to where I spend time in Kuala Lumpur. You probably couldn't do it even in Penang, and both of those cities are going to be too expensive. But to Kota Kinabalu KK in Malaysia on the boring Assad, I think you probably could pull it off, and so you'd have all the benefits of the beautiful Malaysian people. Pretty easy immigration. They let pretty much anybody come in for numerous residence permits or just through tourist visas. Great place to live. I think it has more of that laid-back Asian vibe that you might find people might lack about other parts of Southeast Asia. If you wanted a larger city in Asia, it gets a bit more challenging, because a lot of the larger cities in Asia are expensive. And so let's say you like Asia and you're like me, you like a little bit bigger city. Kuala Lumpur is not going to work. Most cities in Southeast Asia aren't going to work. I thought about Hanoi, but then I felt that for most people being able to stay in Vietnam, it definitely would be a challenge. And so where I would probably go is to Phnom Penh, Cambodia, where you can get a business visa. You can renew that every year. It's becoming more difficult for sure, but perhaps still doable. And while Cambodia is in British sterling pound, which makes some things more similar to the UK, I think you could get by for £800 a month. You could rent something relatively cheap. There is still a good amount of cheap rentals, and you could live there, and I think any big city in Asia might be tough. But I think you could do it there. Unlikely in Hanoi, but again with the condition that it's a bit more difficult to get in and stay there if you want to be on the beach. I think that a lot of the cities in Asia would be expensive. Let's say you want a European beach. Like a bit bigger city. Kuala Lumpur is not going to work. Most cities in Southeast Asia aren't going to work. I thought about Hanoi, but then I felt that for most people being able to stay in Vietnam, it definitely would be a challenge. And so where I would probably go is to Phnom Penh, Cambodia, where you can get a business visa. You can renew that every year. It's becoming more difficult for sure, but perhaps still doable. And while Cambodia is in British sterling pound, which makes some things more similar to the UK, I think you could get by for £800 a month. You could rent something relatively cheap. There is still a good amount of cheap rentals, and you could live there, and I think any big city in Asia might be tough. But I think you could do it there. Unlikely in Hanoi, but again with the condition that it's a bit more difficult to get in and stay there if you want to be on the beach. I think that a lot of the cities in Asia would be expensive. Let's say you want a European beach. I would say there's probably some small towns in the Algarve where you could really stretch it. The benefit is that the British sterling pound is stronger than the euro. What makes Portugal was becoming more cheap. Maybe if you sold your plasma or something, or maybe you could pull it off in some tiny town of the Algarve in Portugal. I think that probably the better bet would be Antalya and Turkey again. Because the decline of the lira, you could probably pull something off, especially if you did a year round lease living there for £800 a month. In Latin America, where would I choose again? Some of the big cities might be tough. If I'm living at £800 a month, I'm not as concerned about tax. And so a place like Bogota, where I love, but wouldn't spend year round, it could be in the list.